This is the Financially Simple Podcast, a show dedicated to destroying the complexities of money for today's small business owner. And now, here's your host, pizza-loving, certified financial planner, Justin Goodbread.
Welcome to Financially Simple. This is a finance show for small business owners about money, how it works in our business and personal lives, and how we can build wealth to be financially independent. I'm your host, Justin Goodbread, and today is episode number 7. Today's episode is titled Business Survival. Sustainability is possible. So that's a lot of S's there, but let's deal with this. A few years ago, in 2004, 2007, I started noticing a very interesting event. It seemed like everybody and their brother was jumping into the home construction business. Now, at the time, I just moved here to Knoxville, and I had just left South Georgia where I had sold a nice little landscape company. And I can remember people leaving their jobs, going to the banks, borrowing $500,000 and building these huge, massive, elaborate houses on the hopes that they would make a quick buck, that they would turn this money into ultimately some quick cash. And many aggressive individuals did just that. They did go in and produce some quick cash. But then I started noticing not only were they making the quick cash, but they were also increasing their lifestyle dramatically over time. Well, all was well and good until it wasn't, which is typically the way it happens. What transpired? Well, the builders of these residential houses didn't have enough capital to weather the storm. They didn't have enough cash to handle the downturn of 07, 08, or 09. And because of that, I'm sure you heard as well, many people filed bankruptcy, especially these contractors who had jumped in the business real quick to make a quick buck. Let's take it out of the construction world. Now, those of you who know me, you know I love spending time in the woods. And when I'm in the woods, one of the things I love to watch is the little squirrels. And especially during the fall time, these little squirrels will run around the woods. They'll find these acorns or nuts. And these squirrels will inevitably start stashing away nuts in the woods so they could get through the wintertime. I know it's a very poor analogy, but there is something unique that the squirrel does that the construction and many times small business owners don't do. The squirrel prepares for the winter. And with the nuts that they don't end up eating in the wintertime, ultimately that ends up replenishing the forest. Guys, business is going to face some turbulent times, and we have to deal with building a business that has sustainability. The key with the business is to start with enough money to get through tough times. And you say, well, Justin, I've already started my business. Yeah, I get that. Maybe you haven't started your business. If you haven't, you got to have enough money to get through tough times. If you have started your business, do you have enough cash right now to weather the storm, to get through the winter time? Go back to my little squirrel analogy. So what is this fancy word, sustainability, and what does it mean? Sustainability means having enough resources to reach consistent profitability. It also means adopting practices in good times to get us through the lean times or the hard times. There's going to be tough times in our business, as we just mentioned. It's going to occur. And sustainability can also mean having the mental determination and fortitude to keep moving despite overwhelming odds. Whenever I started looking for this post, I wanted to figure out why is it that businesses fail? And there is a number one cause. But as I began researching this out, I'm going to give you 10 reasons on why businesses fail ultimately. The first one is the math doesn't continue to work. In other words, I've seen many times people will sell a product or a service only to realize that the product or service they're offering is below market price, and yet the cost to generate that product or service isn't sustainable, and so the business folds. So the math doesn't work sometimes. That's a reason. I see many times another reason, owners just can't get out of their own way. Owners just stand in the middle of their own failure sometimes. They don't allow people to help them. They're either perfectionists, they're greedy, they're over analytical. We see this in the engineering world sometimes, or the analytical, and we call it paralysis by analysis, is a term that I heard years ago. So that's the reason why business will fail. Success, believe it or not, is the reason why business will fail sometimes. In other words, the growth is too fast. And therefore, because the business itself doesn't have the right systems like we talked about for scalability last episode, the business will fail because the growth is too much. Fourth one I'm going to nail it down is a lack of good accounting. Many times business owners feel like we're pulled in 1,000 different directions. I'm one of these guys. I have family members that have businesses that they just leave the finances to other people and they don't even look at the numbers. And that's poor accounting. And so many times if you're not accounting for the taxes, you get hit with a tax bill that puts you under. And so poor accounting can do it. Operational mediocrity means that the business owner describes their job as mediocre. And therefore, they can't build a sustainable or a scalable business like we've talked about in the last few episodes. And that's the reason why businesses fail. Inefficient business management. In other words, you're paying too much or too little for labor. You buy very poor equipment. You don't maintain your equipment. That's the reason businesses fail. Dysfunctional management. I remember one time, and I wish I could go back in this, I was a very poor manager as a kid. I was in my teens. I can remember looking up at this 6'3" guy, and with my finger in his face, I'm all of 5'6". I may have weighed 160 pounds at the time, and I was just going off. And I thought to myself, this guy could just step on me and crush me. And it was just dysfunctional management. It's very poor management on my behalf. One of the sad things, especially as a certified exit planning advisor that I see, is that people don't have succession plans to show what they're going to do to make the business continue. And there's stats that we're going to talk about in later episodes on how important it is to build succession planning in place or continuation planning. The economy is the reason why businesses fail. Sometimes, like we talked about with the home contractors back in 07, 08, 06, 05, the economy was robust, and therefore it led to a lot of upstart businesses in a relatively quick moment. But then when the economy went bust in 07, 08, 09, the economy caused a lot of businesses to go under. But all of those reasons are not the number one cause for businesses to go under. Not at all. The number one reason businesses fail can all be tracked back to they have a lack of capital. In other words, they don't have enough cash to weather whatever the conflict, whatever the storm, whatever the tribulation comes to their way. They don't have enough cash. So that leads me to the question, how much cash is enough in our business? How much cash should we have before we start a business? Or if we're in business right now, how much cash should we maintain today to make sure our business is sustainable to get through that tough winter time that's going to come at some point in every one of our business? So the way I approach this is I walk through a methodology in my mind, and it should help you. Depends on what type of business you're in, but I think we can all apply it across all businesses. So let's look at it this way, and I'm going to assume it's a startup business to begin with. And let's say we're starting up a business, we're maybe a year or two out, and we're just trying to figure out how to make this work.
You are listening to Financially Simple, destroying the complexities of money for today's small business owner.
So the question is, how long will it take us to move from startup to profitability? So let's call this our number, okay? So let's say that it's going to take us 2 years, let's call it, 2-year period of time, and that's our profitability number. Once we know that number, then we're going to calculate the amount of expenses that we're going to have over that startup period. So for kicks and giggles, let's say we have $1 million in expenses over that 2-year period, $500,000 a year. And the expenses can be easily performed. And by the way, I'm just talking how I do a pro forma, but we're going to calculate the expenses. Next, we're going to figure out how much income can we realistically expect to come in that 2-year period. So if we know our expenses are, let's say, $1 million, $500,000 a year, but yet we anticipate we're going to bring in $800,000 of money over that 2-year period of time, then we have now the expenses over our 2-year and our revenue. Now, on the revenue number, I'm going to give you one word of caution. This is a major warning, big capital letters warning here. Be conservative on your revenue assumptions. What I often see is, and I'm guilty of this, every one of us are guilty of this, is that we entrepreneurs often are so passionate about our product or service that we talk ourselves up. We end up anticipating greater numbers than what we can actually achieve. So whenever you're calculating your income, be conservative. So let's go back to our analogy. We have a 2-year time period for our startup time frame. We know we're going to have $1 million in expense in this particular illustration. We know we're going to have $800,000, or we anticipate, I should say, we're going to have $800,000. So therefore, we have a shortfall. That's the fourth point. We have a shortfall in this particular example of about $200,000. Now, That could be, and that probably is your bare bones cash number. That's the amount of cash you need to have to weather the storms to make your business sustainable. But me, I'm a little bit more conservative than that in my numbers in my business. I always want to add about another 20 or 30% buffer. So if I'm looking at, I've got to have about $200,000 of cash, maybe I should have $250,000 of cash instead, and that'll give me a little bit of buffer. And at this point, you're saying, hold the horses there, brother. How in the world can I get this much money before I start my business? Or maybe you're starting your business and you're like, dude, we are barely getting by day to day right now. You honestly think that I'm going to be able to save, in your example, X number of dollars for my business? Well, there's some ways you can achieve funding to make this work for yourself. One of the ways you can achieve funding is to talk to a bank, achieve a line of credit or get a loan. And the sustainability, even once you figure in your interest and your principal payments, it will allow you to get through the tough times. I have a line of credit in my business. Now, currently I'm not on the line of credit, but I have it there nonetheless in case something happens and we need money quick. You just never know. Another way you could achieve funding is you could talk to the SBA or the Small Business Association. If you're a small business starting up, they'll help you potentially, depending on your business plan and the way the pro forma and everything looks. You could potentially end up getting a loan from the Small Business Association. A third way you can look at getting financing is you could talk to an outside investor. Maybe you have somebody who has deep pockets that they want to just invest in a business. And you say, okay, we're going to try to get the $250,000 and I'm going to sign a personal guarantee that I'll pay you that $250,000 back plus interest of 10, 11, 15%. That's an investor. Now, if you have a rich uncle, that's the fourth thing. You can always talk to your family. I'd be cautious there, and this is just me again in my conservative nature. I have a hard time borrowing money from family. The last thing I want to do is sit at the Thanksgiving table, carving that turkey and eating some deer meat, and have my brother, my mother, my sister, my uncle, my cousin, whoever it is, mad at me because I owe them money and I can't pay them back. So I'm not a big fan of borrowing money from family, but I have seen clients who do that, and clients nonetheless didn't have a problem. Perhaps my most favorite way is to save. I'm a big cash guy. Those of you who follow me on any of my blog articles on Financially Simple, or if you've talked to me, you know that I hate debt. I mean, I hate it with a passion. So I understand I just prescribed, if you will, that you could borrow money from a bank. I get that. Personally, I want to save my way, and I always have. I've never borrowed money to start a business. I take that back. I did one time. I borrowed $30,000 and paid it off in about 6 months' time for a particular quick business that I did. But you can save money. You can work a second job. If you're already in business and you're like, brother, I need to save some cash up, well, maybe you cut back on expenses and you look at your P&L and you cut back on the expenses and you try to skin out a little bit of cash and start saving it over the next 12 or 13 months so that you can go into the next phase for sustainability. Maybe you sell some assets. Maybe you have 3 TVs in the house and you don't need that. And that's all the money you need. Maybe you just need a couple $1,000s to get you through the rough time. You may say at this point, Justin, look, you've been talking here, and that's all well and good, but I already operate a successful business. And to that I say, kudos, I'm going to give you the hand clap here. Way to go. I know you have a successful business. Myself, I believe our business is successful. Have many clients who have successful business. And they say, Justin, how can we keep our business sustainable? You know, I've looked at 2 surefire ways to make my business sustainable. I think every time we look at this, it'll cause our businesses to be sustainable and grow and be able to weather the long-term storm. The first one is customers. The second one is cash. If we have a constant increase of customers, then we should be able to maintain the storm. We should be able to weather the storm. If we have cash, cash is king, people. Cash is like gold. I mean, it's actually better than gold in business. So when times are good, maybe you're in a period of famine. Well, you'll go into a period of feast before long. And when times are good, you've got to squirrel some money away. Just like that little squirrel. I know it's a silly example, but you get the point. I'm breaking it down as simple as possible. Before the winter time comes, you've got to look for those little nuts and you've got to bury them. You've got to set some money back for the lean times. When times are good, you always save money. That's where the old adage, pay yourself first, comes from. That's why whenever you read most financial gurus will say, give yourself 10 or 20% of the cash up front. Pay yourself first. Set it back in an emergency fund. So that's what you have to do. Number one is cash is king. Number two, whenever times are good, you've got to add more customers when times are good, because times are going to be rough and new customers are not going to come. So if you're running an upstanding business right now, you have to remember cash and customers. Why am I focused on sustainability? The goal of this particular series is to build a business to sell it. Think about it from an investing standpoint. If you're the investor, you're looking at a business that looks to be pretty well off. One of the questions you're going to ask yourself is this: if I were to purchase this particular business and life, and you can put whatever that is in that life statement, if life were to happen, what is the likelihood this business is going to be able to sustain the proverbial storms? You know, just this year in 2017, when I'm recording this episode, we've had multiple major national catastrophes. We've had flooding in Texas beyond imagination. We've had wildfires all out west, watching homes get destroyed. We've watched this East Coast be pummeled by hurricanes. It's just been amazing to watch these natural disasters. The reason why I point that out is because folks in Florida, the folks out west, and to some point, some of the people in Texas knew that a storm was possible, just like you and I do. I mean, we're in East Tennessee. Do you realize there's more earthquakes in East Tennessee and Kentucky than there are in California? It's crazy. There's storms going to happen at some point in our lives. If an investor comes into your business and they look at your business and they're asking these questions of, can this business sustain the storm? And the answer is no, not without some major revamping, not without some additional cash, not without, and they just fill in the blank, then you're not going to sell the business for maximum dollar. In fact, on this particular point, if your business is not sustainable, more than likely you're going to have a lowball offer, if an offer at all. So building a sustainable business through cash positions, through customer basis, through operational efficiencies, through systems, making the business sustainable to weather the storm is paramount at this point of this particular podcast series. So guys, that's it for this particular episode. We're going to put episode number 7 in the books. For those of you watching us on YouTube, you will rarely see this. I am wearing a sports coat today. Don't ask me why. It's cold outside. I wanted to throw this thing on, and I don't know. Tell me if you like it. Shoot me a message below. Hey guys, as I always say, life is hard. Business is stressful. It is fun sometimes. Money and business, it really doesn't have to be. Let's just continue to make our lives at least financially simple. Hey, y'all make it a great day.
You have been listening to the Financially Simple Podcast. The information in this show is for informational purposes only. This show is not investment advice. Instead, seek help from a competent financial advisor. Justin Goodbread, CFP, is an investment advisor representative of Heritage Investors, a registered investment advisor.